Manuel Hinojosa is a man of many accomplishments as architect and artist, as you can see from the cover of your brochure today. I guess in line with the Texas values theme, as a government bureaucrat, there are a number of accomplishments that Manuel has made in his life, but I've found him as a part of myself, as a part of that brotherhood of the Flying Barbecue Sandwich, and digging out into the Mexican retreat, and then in hearing about his work and about his expertise on the Mexican Army, the 19th century Mexican Army, from Greg Dimick. Greg was always telling me what ideas and what finds, and we've heard about one of them already today, that Manuel was able to come up with in his work on this archaeology of Texan and Mexican military history. As you can see, we're sort of moving in a direction with these 5 speakers today. Now that you've heard 3 of them, we're kind of moving in a direction of explanation of what it is that's going on here on the battlefield that the NRG site has enabled them to find. And so Manuel is going to take us another step along the way, and we thank him for coming up from Port Isabel today and speaking to us and enlightening us as to what was happening on the battlefield, the results of which and the evidence of which is only coming to light as we speak. Manuel?
You know, I sat there and I heard Doc complain about, this pay, the T-shirt. What he doesn't tell you is that he's always made us follow us. He made us follow him doing these things, so you can imagine what we get out of it. What I'm going to talk about is, the items like the uniforms, the accoutrements, and the buttons that we have recovered at these sites. There seems to be little written about or images that we have available that describe some of these items. A lot of them are personal items, some of them are uniform items. And so when we start to try to analyze them, we find that it becomes very difficult, and sometimes it's hard for us to understand. What this presentation has done is taken other examples and try to make a case to see if we know, and we're speculating too. A lot of the images, a lot of the pictures are only sometimes guesses of what we think they are, and just lead us to some findings where we can share with you some more of a scientific answer to it, because you have been hearing scientific answers. I think my subject's a little bit different in that sense, and so I want to show you examples of findings that we have come across in Mexico, in Texas, and findings along some of these sites like the docks, the Sea of Mud sites, and even some of the other sites that are Texas related. This image right here is another example of how some of these ideas of what the uniforms looked, and it represents the 1829 the Battle of Tampico. This is really the first time that you get an idea of how the Mexican Army was trying to shape up, and it's a commission from General Santana by ours by name of Paris. And in here, you start seeing some of the things that we think we're finding at the site, and especially if you can see some of the cavalry and the helmets that really came that existed during this time, but you didn't into the Mexican War, you find them being obsolete. And starting off with the cavalry, and I think that's an area that was mentioned earlier, is that the Mexican cavalry, again, is only described in some of the information, especially like in Hefter, that a document that we follow a lot. But what we do know about the Mexican cavalry, there was three types of cavalry: the heavy, the line, and the light cavalry. And in this case, I'm showing you more of a heavy cavalry that existed during that time. Now, the first company of every unit was really a lancer, so you even have a lancer aspect. What we're not sure of is exactly what kind of cavalry was on this site. And even to the point where we have some items, in this case, you see this socket with a shaft on top that we may think is something that is represented from the top of the helmet, where you have a cropping that's part of the decoration of this cuirassier, or type of heavy type of cavalry officer. At the recovery site, what we have also found is this small little object held between the two fingers, the thumb and the finger, and it seems like it could be something very, very decorative that was on top of a helmet. In this case, you're looking at a helmet that was used from the French style during the time 1805, 1850, Napoleon period, and maybe it's part of the socket of a spear that was on top of maybe another half a socket. So again, we would speculate that this little shaft that you see on the top portion of the picture in the bottom, it represents a decoration on this type of a helmet. The examples that we have are not available in the Mexican type of headgear, but at the same time we're finding very interesting items. This looks very pre-colonial, and it seemed like if the units were known to have their own identity, and therefore probably even created some of the gear and equipment that they had. One of the big important finds, and that I have seen at this site, was we found several buttons, and the buttons are marked. The markings on here, as you can see, is a D, dot, and S. Some people said it was an 8, but to our opinion, or my opinion, it represents a D dot S. And in the labeling of the units, a lot of times the dot represented abbreviation. So something like this could be an abbreviation of dragoons. It could be abbreviation, in this case I don't think it is, of maybe a militia unit from Durango, and even one of the 6 units that was named after battles during the independence of Mexico, which could have been the Dolores, named after the Battle of Dolores, Guanajuato, or what is now Dolores Hidalgo. What's interesting here is that I found a similar button like this in interior Mexico, and it's the only other button that I have seen beside the ones that are found on this site. And these kind of buttons are pewter buttons. They might have been labeled under some of the descriptions of the white metal, which was indicated to be used by cavalry. The soldier, the cavalry, on the left-hand side represents someone, what he might have looked like. Notice that in this case, his headgear doesn't have that socket on top or the heavy type of cavalry, but more of a comb that might have been used. It seems like it might have been used more in the light infantry or even line infantry that existed during that time. Again, this could have been a unit from the Dolores cavalry, which was at the site. Again, it's just a speculation on our part. And just to show you where these two different buttons were found, if you look at this here as being San Jacinto, this button was found more than 500 miles away in Paredon on the old Camino Real trail. And so even the examples, they're not, they're far in between. They still tell us a little bit about what the soldier might have looked like. The uniform buttons that were found on the site, besides that, were simple buttons. They were what we call coin buttons. The examples are probably soldiers that did not have any rank, but were mostly just used as a simple, plain, without any identification. Some of them had back markings that indicate to us that might have been imported. But as a whole, the buttons were not labeling any units on the face, and they were mostly made out of brass, except for the one I showed you earlier was more of a pewter button. Other examples, like this cluster of buttons, shows this is a Mexican battle site that represents the different kinds of buttons that the soldier would use. And I think we have something similar happening at this site. The emblems were common in the Mexican Army. The light infantry, which is represented by this hunting horn that you see on the cartridge box, is represented there by this one right here is represented by a fragment that was found at the site, and you can see that this is the part of the hunting horn that has an attachment. The attachment is at this point. The complete piece it was not there, only it was a partial piece, but it tells us that there was a light infantry at that site. Another example on the battle site was this hunting horn, and even a thin piece of brass that was probably used on a shako. And that were found in prior recoveries there at San Jacinto. I want to show you this because I'm going to go into more of emblems, and these are examples of emblems from the past at different locations, different types, different periods. But it just shows you that how a design can change. And there's so many different examples that we have to look at, and sometimes we can't ever tell you what period or even what type of unit are using them. This map represents the area where you have San Jacinto and all the way to Victoria, and it shows the route that Filosola took to Old Fort, but at the same time, it shows you that this type of an emblem, the grenade emblem, which represents more the Grenadiers, it could even represent artillery, but it could be used on a cartridge box. It could be used even on a headgear emblem. But this one being found at the recovery site of San Jacinto, recovered at the San Jacinto site, also has been found in other locations along this route. This one right here was found at across the creek at Madame Powell's, and there was even one found in the Sea of Mud. A similar one was even found in Goliad. But they all pretty much were very much alike in the structure and the look. These are cast brass, filed type of emblems, and usually made out of a combination of copper, zinc, and tin. And they were mostly made in Mexico. Mexican artisans were very good at doing this, but they also gave a little bit of a character different in different units from each other. We found a lot of fragments, thin roll type stamp fragments, and best we can speculate on these that they were from a shako area, because this was a common material that was used to represent the unit and as far as an emblem. This right here, you can see that when you try to piece it together, it's very hard. The bottom, or this right here, seems to be a central point type of a fragment. We really couldn't tell what that was. only that it seemed like it had some kind of a burst, a sunburst type of effect. And one of the things that was interesting about this is that there's pieces of this look like they've been sheared, forming part of this sunburst or design that was there. But one of the things that you do too is you look at it and say, what else could it be? I brought this picture in to show you something that I found this in eBay, and it shows it was labeled as a portrait of Santana. As I started to look at this, you could see there's attachment, there's holes on the ends that represent that it was attached probably to a shako, very similar to shakos. And this is not necessarily a frame for a portrait. It looks like a grenade or a flaming bomb, where you have the bomb and also the flames coming up. An interesting thing about this also is it has this eye in the middle of a triangle. And it could have been very, very much personalized, representing a Masonic emblem. But the image that was labeled as Santana could have been an image of Vicente Guerrero, which is one of the units that was at this site. There was the units were in 1833 were named after heroes of Mexican independence. But it just shows of all kinds of things that this could represent, and this is just one example. The infantry units also had emblems, and at this site, the pieces that are shown in over an example, we know for sure it is a plate that we had an example of before, not found in the site, but it gives us an idea of what this was. And you can see that this oval design as being a hat plate, and it was attached where the two holes were on each side. The fragments are laid over this piece to show you how they would fit. The actual piece would look like this. And you can see the eagle, and it doesn't necessarily have a snake in its beak, but it does have the words permanente. And at the same time, it has what looks like a G, a G in script, and we believe that represents the Guerrero outfit, one of the units battalions that was at that site. So it gives us more. There's more evidence here to show us that probably this is something that was from a soldier from the Guerrero unit. Other examples were similar to show you that this was a pattern is another generic eagle. This was not found at the site, but it represents a similar type of plate. And as a matter of fact, one of those was found at Goliad. So you can see the units had different markings, and they were insignias on the shakos. There was a series or a number of brass scales from chin straps found at the site. And you can see that there are fragments, but they represent a chin strap with two holes on the top that would be tied together and scaled as a chin strap for maybe a shako, maybe even a helmet from a cavalry unit. But these examples are represented in other finds that of Mexican Army, and you can see that there's so many different varieties. In this case, we showed 6 different varieties of chin strap scales. There are different shapes, different sizes, even the different number of holes that you attach to. These even have numbers on them to show the sequence of the scales and how they're connected. Here's an example of how these scales would have been put together. The shako itself also would have and this is an example of a shako from a Mexican soldier from a different period, really. But it has the leather that the scales were on, and so you could really strap the leather piece, not necessarily the scales. There was, as mentioned earlier, there was some fabric that was found that was wrinkled in with some brass pieces. And I'm just showing you this because it was found, but I will show you other examples that have come up of a Mexican soldier. It could have been a linen type of like a sailcloth that was used, a lienzo that was used in soldier dress, maybe a fine lining. And the example here shows something real similar to that, as well as they mentioned a lot of Querétaro cloth, which was a place where they fabricated many of the uniforms. At this stage of the game, it requires some lab work so we can come back and identify that. Other items on the site, were the buckles, and some of these, Dr. Dimmick indicated, some items we don't know what they are, and which are represented right here. And it's just been an accumulation of information that we've been gathering. That's the end of my talk.